Flip, flip. Flip, flip. Yes, the Spider-Man saga is back in cinemas in the UK. All the Spider-Man live-action films since 2002 are getting their day in the sun back in the box office over the next few weeks. So I thought, I'll do a series revisiting the Spider-Man films. I won't go to the cinema because I've got them all on physical media. I will watch them on my home theatre and then talk about them for you good people. Starting off with Spider-Man from 2002. Yes, welcome back to my world of stuff. My name is Paul Mount. If you are new here, why not press the like button? Why not press the subscribe button? Leave a comment, tell your friends. Be nice to get the channel numbers up. I'm heading towards 800 quite slowly, so please stick around, jump aboard, loads of stuff to come, lots of retro movie reviews, new movie reviews out and about, lots of Doctor Who stuff. Although it's a bit quiet at the moment, obviously. But yeah, stick around. Join the fun of my world of stuff. Right, Spider-Man 2002. I have very fond memories of this film. I haven't seen it for years. There have been a lot of Spider-Man films, of course. We had the 3 Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. We had the 2 Andrew Garfield films. And we've had 3 films with Tom Holland. And hopefully more to come. So there's been a lot of Spider-Man. But what's interesting about the 2002 version by Sam Raimi, this is the most comics accurate version of Spider-Man, and certainly Spider-Man's origin, that we've had. And I appreciated that, particularly watching it now, because in the more recent Spider-Man films, we've had reimaginings of characters reinvented, recreated, for modern sensibilities or for creative reasons or whatever. But Sam Raimi's film, the very first, went right back to the beginning, right back to Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's early comics, and pretty much brought them to the screen. I remember the film coming out, there was much excitement, because of course this was before the MCU. It's a Marvel film, but the MCU as such didn't exist. This was just a freestanding film, brought to us by Sony, who have been flogging their part of the Marvel universe ever since, with varying degrees of failure. So this was something fresh. We'd had Superman and Batman and so on in the 80s and 90s, but this was the first proper deep dive and forage into Marvel with their most famous and acclaimed and popular character. And there was much excitement for the film. I remember that I and a few friends, we drove to Swansea to see it in, I think it was View Cinema in Swansea. I don't actually know if that cinema's still there, but for some reason it wasn't showing early in Cardiff. I think we saw a midnight screening, and I think we thoroughly enjoyed it. But by 2002, I was no longer reading comics. I'd been a big Marvel fan from 72 to about 78. Bought a lot of British comics when they were republished over here, then started buying American comics when selections of them were released over here in newsagents. But by 2002, my superhero days were well behind me, but I still had a fondness for those characters. And being a film fan, I was particularly interested to see Spider-Man on the big screen. It had been a long time coming. There'd been plans to do a Spider-Man film for years. Various versions had fallen through, and it was Sam Raimi who finally managed to do it in 2002, and it was a terrific film, and it is still a terrific film. And as I said, one of the things I really appreciate is the fact that it is so faithful to the original comic. This is Spider-Man's origin, and it takes its lead very much from the early Spider-Man strip, where Peter Parker is this slightly geeky, gawky, awkward student. He's not popular, girls ignore him, the boys beat him up. Flash Thompson, the famous bully of the early Spider-Man comics. And Peter can't catch a break. Of course, he's played by Tobey Maguire. It's great casting. I wasn't very familiar with Tobey Maguire at the time. He's always been an actor who's slightly outside of the mainstream Hollywood, because he's not your typical leading man. He's not your big, muscular, two-fisted sort of hero, square-jawed hero. He's geeky, he's awkward-looking. And it's good casting because he brings that across particularly well as Peter Parker. He's in love with MJ, played by Kirsten Dunst. Of course, she in the comics is the love of Spider-Man's life with that flaming ginger hair. Played well here by Kirsten Dunst. It's her best performance as the character. I know that she becomes a little bit whiny, a little bit me in later films, but here she's good here because she's a bit of an outsider herself. She lives next door to Peter, but she's got abusive parents and she's got an uncomfortable home life. So she's as much an outsider as Peter in a way, but of course she's got a bit more going for her because she's got a bit more personality and she's popular with the crowd. At a science project, Peter is busy taking photographs for the school magazine. Yeah, nice excuse, Peter. And he gets bitten by a radioactive spider. And then we follow the through line from the comics where he develops these extraordinary abilities of shooting web from his wrists, climbing up walls, swinging between buildings, huge strength, proportionate strength of a spider, I think they used to call it in the comics. And he becomes Spider-Man. And again, it follows the line of the early Spider-Man comics. In an attempt to get some money, he becomes a masked wrestler. He gets swindled out of his winnings at a wrestling match. He then makes a pretty poor error of judgment when the promoter of the show is robbed at gunpoint. Peter doesn't step in and stop the promoter because he himself has been swindled out of money, so we think, why should I care? But then, of course, that robber goes on to murder his Uncle Ben, played by Cliff Robertson, shortly afterwards. And Uncle Ben has previously sort of lectured him this with great power comes great responsibility thing. Again, that was a great Stan Lee bit of moralising for the comics. So I think it's really good the way that they didn't ignore the comics. They didn't rewrite the history of the comics. They stuck very much to the comics. He then becomes Spider-Man. It veers off slightly because the Green Goblin becomes his first adversary. He's played here by Willem Dafoe, as he played him, in fact, in No Way Home. He's a millionaire industrialist, inventor, who's got this business, Oscorp, but he's ousted from the company by other board members, but he's already experimented and split his personality. He's part Norman Osborn, he's part the evil Green Goblin. He's bad, his evil side that manifests himself in this mechanical costume, and he flies around on this glider causing chaos. Which, of course, needs Spider-Man, who is getting a bit of a reputation. As in the comics, J. Jonah Jameson, played brilliantly by J.K. Simmons, he detests Spider-Man and he tries to expose him and unmask him as a villain, even though Spider-Man's trying to do good. So it very much reflects those early Spider-Man comics, and it brings it to screen so vividly and so well. And eventually, of course, Peter / Spider-Man finds himself in combat with Norman Osborn's Green Goblin. Doesn't realise he's the Green Goblin until the very end of the film. And there are several explosive set pieces, particularly a scene on Brooklyn Bridge, where the Green Goblin forces Spider-Man to make a choice between saving the life of MJ and saving the life of a bunch of kids on a cable car. Can Spider-Man do both? One of the things that you always think about when watching a historic sort of action-adventure fantasy film, what are the effects like? How do they stand up? And of course, we're used to extraordinary special effects in our films these days. CGI has run amok, really. It's probably gone the other extreme where there's so much of it you can do anything that you're no longer impressed by it. But this is 2002. Again, not exactly the early days of CGI, but it's moved on in leaps and bounds, particularly in the case of Spider-Man since 2002. But this still looks really good. A lot of people often complain that the effects in Spider-Man, in particularly the first Spider-Man, let it down, that the scenes of Spider-Man swinging between rooftops aren't good. I'm here to tell you that they are good. Particularly that breathtaking final scene when Spider-Man is just swinging between the buildings and spinning around. It still looks great. Still looks really very impressive. I know they improved it even more for Spider-Man 2, and of course the modern Spider-Man films, it's second nature to do that sort of stuff. But this stuff in this film still looks very good. There are some earlier scenes where the animation is quite clearly a little animated figure. I'm thinking particularly of the scene where Peter's testing out his powers and he's running across rooftops and leaping between buildings. Some of the mat work is a bit and there's a sort of a lack of heft to the CGI miniature figure. But these are split-second sequences that, you know, we notice them now because we don't get that sort of stuff generally these days. CGI is generally pretty incredible these days, so we don't notice flaws. So there's a couple of little bits, but otherwise the effects are all good. There's a lot of practical effects, of course, which look terrific as well. It's stood the test of time, shall we say. I don't think anybody watching it now will be particularly disappointed. Now, as I said, I saw it on my TV screen. Actually, I didn't watch it in the cinema room, and it looked great there. I'll be interested to see anybody who sees it in the cinema now, if the flaws are more noticeable, blown up into a big cinema screen. Certainly watching it on my pretty big home TV, it looked pretty good to me. All in all, I thought it was a great film. The performances were all good. Tobey Maguire, you have to accept he is great as Peter Parker and Spider-Man, and he just has that awkwardness of Steve Ditko's original illustrations back in the early 60s. Rosemary Harris is terrific as Aunt May. Of course, now we're used to a glamorous Aunt May. It's quite interesting to see her, again, depicted comics accurate. Willem Dafoe is always good. Green Goblin isn't quite as he was in the comics. He's sort of updated for the 21st century, but the character is still has that same manic malevolence as he had in the comics. James Franco is great as Harry Osborn, Peter's best friend, who at the end of the film swears vengeance on Spider-Man for causing the death of his father, which of course leads on through the next couple of films. So all in all, a really good film. Really enjoyed watching it again. Very pleased that it stands the test of time. Very pleased to see that it does pay its debt to the origins of Spider-Man. It doesn't rewrite the myths and the legends of the character. The more recent films have done, for whatever reasons, whether to differentiate themselves from the earlier incarnations of Spider-Man or whether to tick boxes or whatever. But I think that this is Spider-Man as I read it back in the 70s from those original 60s comics. The music is terrific. It really works very well, and it just looks great. It's a really good film, thoroughly worth revisiting if you're thinking of doing it, whether you do it at home on your 4K disc, no slipcover, or choose to see it in the cinema. Let me know if you have revisited Spider-Man, what your thoughts about it are. Leave a comment down below, that would be fantastic. And as I said earlier, please please subscribe, because I'll be doing a complete run of the other Spider-Man films, even Spider-Man 3. And I'm particularly interested to watch the Andrew Garfield films again, because they get a bad press. And I remember seeing it at the time, and I was conscious that the second one wasn't great. But I thought the first one wasn't bad. So I'll be interested to revisit those, and of course the Tom Holland films I'm more familiar with. But again, I haven't watched them that recently. So it'll be quite nice to take a voyage across the Spider-Verse. Ooh, will I watch the Spider-Verse films as well? That's interesting. Anyway, I'll have to think about that. I'm thinking at the moment of live-action Spider-Man, so that's what I'm focusing on. Right, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. As I said, like, subscribe, do all that sort of stuff. I'll see you soon. Till I do, keep taking the stuff.